went up here, and I apologize for that. All right, let's go ahead and get started here. And again, I would like to just put in a plug for accreditation. Yes, we do these things for assessment or for accreditation. However, accreditation represents good practice, and assessment, the whole focus of assessment is about how do we help our students learn better, retain more? How do we improve our processes? And I think regardless of whether there's an assessment or accreditation requirement or not, these are things that we ought to be focused on as faculty and be interested in as members of the Academy. So can everybody see a slide that says spring 2022? Do I have everything up and running here?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Good. All right. So our process that we're going to use here today is I'm going to show you a little bit of data, and then we're going to have a little bit of a conversation about what that data is. I'll show you the next set, we have a conversation, and we'll just switch back and forth till we get through all 4 of the outcomes that we were looking at. So we are going to be looking today at 4 outcomes: personal responsibility, social responsibility, visual communication, and oral communication. So these are, and under here, under each one, you'll see the disciplines that contribute to each of those areas. So for example, personal responsibility, English 1301, 1302 students, we use their signature assignments. Anything in the language, philosophy, and culture band, so that's like the English lit courses as well as philosophy. I believe we have a Latino studies course in that area as well. And then of course, government is political science. Social responsibility, social and behavioral sciences contribute those artifacts. Those include everything from psychology and sociology to critical race studies. I believe we have a social work course in there and some criminal justice work courses in with that cohort. Visual comm, math, as well as just the art classes. Now, technically the theater and the music are supposed to be contributing to that, but it is not a good match. It's something that we need to work on during the semester to try to resolve. And then of course, oral communication, all of those artifacts will come from oral comm courses, so comm studies courses. So personal responsibility, technically what it means is we're going to be connecting actions and consequences to ethical decision making. So that's what we want our students to be able to do. We use a rubric, and the 4 components of that rubric are ethical self-awareness, understanding different ethical perspectives, application of ethical perspectives, and evaluation of ethical perspectives. So this is what the data looks like. And we've measured this one twice. Our success criterion is that we want 70% of the artifacts we look at to score at a 2.5 or higher on each component here. And you can see that when we first did this, this was the first time we assessed this outcome in spring 2019. We had 46% of our students were scoring at the ethical self-awareness level, 34% at understanding different ethical perspectives, 40% applications of ethical perspectives, 20% at evaluation of ethical perspectives, with an overall of 27%. When we reassessed this this last spring, these were artifacts that came from fall 2020 and spring 2021. You can see that while we're not at that 70% yet, we have really improved across the board. So even though we're not at that 70% yet, you can see that we've gone from 46 to 63. We've met it here and here. A little bit of problems here, and we're very close here. So we went ahead and colored that in green. Any questions about the data?
What does the star on the 22-day represent?
I'm glad you asked. So you'll notice that there's some difference in sample sizes. In spring 2019, or 18, we were able to get through 53 samples. In 2021, we only did 22. And there was a reason for that. The faculty are actually recruited to do the evaluations. And we only had 4 faculty that showed up for that evaluation session. And so they were able to get through, we were able to pull, I think, almost 75 samples, but they only had time to evaluate. Each sample, each artifact is read twice. And if the first 2 faculty are not in agreement, then we have a third reader as a tiebreaker. And so they were able to get through 22. That size and that difference in sample size gives me pause.
Leah, was there anything done between the 18 cycle and the 2021 cycle, like to the criteria? So see that those are big jumps in the rating. So is there any structural reason that we should be seeing this, or is this really curricular improvement kind of stuff?
One of the things that we did was we went back and worked on aligning the signature assignment prompt more closely with the rubric. And you often see low scores when there's not a lot of alignment, because faculty, when they read that, artifact, they're looking for that particular dimension of the rubric. And if they can't find it, sometimes they score things lower. They're just not quite sure what to do with it. And so when you have better aligned artifacts with the rubric, you see the scores increase. Juliana?
Yeah, I was just going to give my perspective on that. I'm not sure exactly when these started, but I mean, I know that my experience as a faculty member was I was told, like, I think I already had my classes planned. I had a course that was going that I was very happy with. And all of a sudden I'm told, you need a new paper on personal responsibility. And it really didn't have it wasn't something I had taught before. It wasn't something I didn't know what to tell the students to do. I didn't know what you guys were looking for. I mean, it kind of got dropped on us. So I think from my perspective, it took some time to kind of give instructions to the students, see what they wrote, and then go, oh, this isn't really good. They need better instruction. Like it takes a while to figure out how to present the assignment to the students and how to craft it and how to do the instructions and how much guidance the students need. So I would suspect that a lot of professors were in my position, whereas it took us some time to kind of figure out, what was being looked for in that assignment, and to create the space in the course and the time and the instructions and so on to enable students to do a decent job on the assignment.
Now, this 2018 data was from the pilot process. So in 2014, the faculty worked, there were several groups working on this, various aspects of a new general education core. And so that was launched in 2014. And then we spent the next 3 years working with faculty to try to implement that. So designing that first round of assessment or signature assignments, that kind of thing. And so you're absolutely right, Julia. What we might really be seeing is that faculty just have gotten comfortable with this assignment and feel like they kind of figured it out, if you will.
One of the other things that you may find is newer faculty who have been more recently hired, they may not get the full information on what is required for core courses. And this is something that the chairs of the departments should communicate to you, or someone who's responsible for coordinating these courses needs to communicate that this is a course within the general education core, therefore it has this requirement placed on it. Because usually if someone submits a new course, they have to make sure that it fills that requirement for everything if it goes through the curriculum process. And then we know that a new course meets the standard. But for an existing course that is taught by new faculty, it may be a little bit challenging to assume that every onboarded new faculty member gets that same information. And
I wondered, how are the core assessment requirements communicated to faculty members? And also, I wondered, has there been any consideration of having a sort of standardized assignment that that all courses or all sections of a course will have to assign?
that's a great question. Because every learning outcome has different expectations, there isn't a standard, but many disciplines have moved towards a standardized assignment. So history, I know, has a template for an assignment that faculty can adopt, and they simply have the requirements in place. Psychology 1303 has the same requirement. Chemistry has the same approach, same assignment within all courses, all sections of the same course. So some disciplines have taken it upon themselves to create these resources, and some disciplines have not.
And are they the exact same assignment, or are they sort of variations on a theme?
Both approaches have been adopted. In chemistry, it's an experiment that the students do, and they generate their own data. So it's exactly the same assignment for everyone. But I've seen variations on the history assignment. Travis says psychology has the same assignment. Math has, I believe, the same assignment with some variations possible.
Math has a series of signature assignments, and then we rotate them through so that we can minimize the cheating. It's the same structure, just a slightly different data set or a slightly different set of instructions. And then we rotate those through.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say in the English department, it's a free for all. But I mean, there's reasons for that, which is that if you're looking at composition, there's not one textbook or one set of material that's being taught in composition. We're teaching, there's a common learning outcomes, right? In terms of, the kinds of writing students have to learn how to do. But in terms of the content of the course, like what people are writing about varies completely from course to course. So like my composition course focuses on doing research on global health issues and on AIDS. Somebody else's might be focused on selecting job prospects or the criminal justice system, or incarceration or something. So when you talk about personal responsibility, you say, how does personal responsibility relate to the AIDS crisis? It's going to be a very different kind of assignment, or somewhat different kind of assignment from if you were talking about how does personal responsibility relate to the criminal justice system or something like that. So we don't have one, the material that's being covered in terms of content varies hugely across those courses. So there's no set assignment.
And how is it communicated to the individual professors? You said through the chair usually, but is there some sort of documentation that's sent to all professors teaching courses in which this type of assessment will occur?
I know that in the English department, what happens in the composition program, we have a director of composition, and at the beginning of every semester, the director of composition has a meeting and sends out information to everyone instructing in the department. And that includes then some basic information about the signature assignment. And I would say at the sophomore level, there's not much instruction given at all, because there's no director really of the sophomore level courses. But as I said, I remember when this first dropped on us, we really didn't have a clue. It was just like throw in a personal responsibility assignment. I was like, I don't know. I made up something. So I'm sure it wasn't very good initially and I'm sure many people were in my shoes because we had no model to follow. We had no detailed instructions at the time. Later on, we started to get rubrics that were like, this is how we're assessing it. And then I said, oh, you're looking at this? You're looking at this? I didn't even ask my students to do those things. So I it was actually the assessment rubrics that helped to kind of guide the creation of that. But
Yeah, that makes total sense because sometimes when we're assessing artifacts, it's kind of a bit curious that an assignment was given to the students that doesn't quite fit the rubric. And so now I sort of see the reason why. And so it's good that that professors now are able to see what's being looked for.
When we transitioned from the old core to the new core, for about a year and a half, me and a couple of the other faculty would do workshops on how to align signature assignments with the rubrics. So we provided the rubrics, we did the signature assignments, we gave feedback and that kind of thing. I think what has happened though is that we have, maybe we need to go back and revisit that. Maybe we do more of those workshops because we do have an entirely different set, or we have a whole new cohort of new faculty that have joined us recently. And I can see how it would kind of feel like, oh my gosh, this has just kind of been dropped on me and I have no idea what I'm doing. And so I definitely think it needs to be part of maybe new faculty orientation, and that maybe we need to do a better job with outreach.
If I may add to that, the other issue that we had with communication of the signature assignment requirement was that many of our lower level courses are taught by part-time faculty, and those courses are not assigned early. Sometimes they get assigned last minute or during the first week of classes. And so even when we attempted to inform faculty, you know, a couple of weeks in advance, it hasn't always worked out well.
All right. First off, one of the things that we want to discuss or get your feedback on is, first off, what do we? I think we've gotten some good input on assessment. We definitely need to do a better job providing professional development, helping faculty understand what those rubrics are, and then provide some professional development to help them align their assignments with that rubric. That's definitely something we need to do. Are there any recommendations that you have in terms of content? And I know, I'm just going back up here. One of the interesting things about this core is that students don't, it is several courses that help students build these skills. And a good example is writing. Yes, certainly 1301 and 1302, Comp 1 and 2, form the foundation of students' writing education. But then the sophomore level lit classes build on that. The history courses, all of the history courses have a major assignment. So in other words, you're getting your
ELIASSON.
Somebody's mic is open.
So are there other ways that we might help students improve in terms of their ethical self-awareness or in the evaluation of ethical perspectives?
I wondered whether there's a way for students to easily have sort of an overview of the various ethical philosophies sort of at their fingertips. Like in the College of Business, we have a BCAT course shell. And so the students take the BCAT sort of exit exam. And so it's a separate course shell that can house various information concerning the exam and review materials and anything else that we choose to put into it. And so I wondered whether there's a similar type of repository for students where they can have sort of in one place a kind of overview of the material that's being covered, like if there's sort of a glossary of terms, so to speak.
I know we don't have that currently. Now, if a student takes, I believe that there is an ethics course that's part of the philosophy group in language, philosophy, and culture. If they take that course in language, philosophy, and culture, then they would have that background. But if they satisfy that component of the core with some other course, for example, Latino studies, they may not.
Yeah, so it might be something that could be considered to have sort of a repository through Blackboard or through some other instrument that could provide students with like either a crash course if they haven't encountered it already, or sort of brief review, just so that even if it's something that they've encountered, but it's been a little bit of a while since they've done that, they can review that and have sort of a general understanding.
Any other thoughts on how we might help students improve? If we do a repository, just as an example, Corinne, I think it's an interesting idea. If we do a repository, we still have to let students know that that exists, and we have to let faculty know. And so there is a degree of marketing associated with it.
I'll add a thought about that. I mean, I don't know if it seems unfair to send the students to do extra work that's not part of their courses, right? I mean, I think that it's the responsibility of the course, I guess, to teach this. But what's really not clear to me is that, I mean, and I understand that these requirements were handed down to us and we have to meet them, but these were not part of the initial like structure of these courses, right? The courses were not designed to teach this. I mean, composition is not specifically designed to teach personal responsibility. That was not something that was ever in the course until we were required to do it. You understand what I'm saying? And it's significant because in composition, we're generally teaching students to write sort of academic style writing where you don't insert yourself into the text, where it's not about opinion and belief, where it's like research and things like that. And so, you know, to really do this project well, honestly, you would really need to devote time to this and then talk about a different style of writing and really talk about, you know, engage in like different ideas about it's basically you need a philosophy course on ethics, which is not what composition is. And you can say, well, we should add that in. But the thing is that's we already have 1,000 things we're trying to cover in that course or those courses. You understand what I'm saying? So the truth is, what you're really seeing is that there's an incompatibility. There's not an incompatibility in the sense of discussing ethical issues. Most, if not all of these courses are deeply engaged in ethical issues, but that's different from producing a paper that's in a certain kind of language that reflects the specific things the rubric's asking for, right? How do I talk about my core values? How do I, you know, contrast my values with those of other people? How do I, like, our faculty isn't trained to teach that. That's philosophy, that's ethics. There's a specific field of study that covers that, and we don't cover that, not in that way. Students aren't writing in that way. So we've been kind of saddled with an assignment that doesn't necessarily easily fit. So it takes a lot of kind of work and time to figure out how to incorporate those assignments. So truthfully, I think sending the students somewhere else, do they need more? Probably they do. I feel like my students do. They don't know. I can see, I read the results. They don't know how to write these papers. It's how much of my semester am I supposed to give over to preparing students for this paper? I mean, like for that aspect of the paper, like these are English courses, they're always writing papers. That's not the issue. but the specific idea of the personal responsibility essay written in a different style from what we normally do in an English department, right? So I think it needs to be addressed through the faculty. And I think it needs to come in the form of like real thoughtful suggestions about how to do this and how this to make this work within the context of our disciplinary field. Does that make any sense? But I hope I hope I'm making clear like why this is a challenge for the faculty is because it doesn't fit with what we're doing. I don't mean that we don't care about ethics. We deeply care about ethics, but the specifics of the nature of that assignment doesn't necessarily fit easily into the way that our courses were previously designed.
So just a little bit of history here. When we redesigned the course, we set up, I believe, 15 different working groups, one for each discipline. And each discipline or group of faculty, English is an example. They actually had two, one for the lit group and one for the comp 1 and 2. And they were told, these are the things that need to be touched on as required by the state. And their role, their responsibility was to revise the English course so that it allowed for coverage of this. Now, we may have lost that over time, but there's actually, if you look at the actual learning outcomes from the course, and I'm assuming if there's a learning outcome, there is content to support it. Personal responsibility, connecting actions and choices to consequences is a learning outcome in the course.
Those learning outcomes are listed separately. I'm just saying, like, I'm not, I mean, I get it that this is now our responsibility, but I'm saying like two things. I'm saying one, if you want to understand why there may seem to be a quality gap, part of the reason is because these didn't fit naturally into the work that we were doing. Secondly, because I think it's not enough to just like write out a learning outcome. I don't think that the faculty really knows how to teach this. And in fairness, that's because this is not our field. That's the field of ethics and philosophy. Okay, so I get it. We got saddled with this. This is like our responsibility. But and somebody somewhere, some committee agreed and thought this was a good idea. And we're not going to change that. But I'm just saying, like, I think if you want to make it better, probably need like a faculty, like actual faculty get together seminar, whatever, where we really talk about like how to incorporate that. We probably need a philosophy person to come in and help us, because I don't actually even know how to fix that. You understand what I'm saying? Like, I'm being honest. Like, I don't know how you write an ethics paper. I've never taken an ethics course in my life. And I would venture to say that's true of most of the English faculty who are teaching these courses. And I feel like we're being asked to do something that we're not trained for. And then the results don't look exactly like what we want them to look like. That's not a surprise, because it's one thing to say, do this. It's another thing to give us the tools to do it well. Right, and to get buy-in from the faculty rather than have it be tacked on at the end as a like, I met the requirement, check the box. Right, that's like, I'm being real here. Right, that's what I did initially. They said, all of a sudden you have to do this. I've got a whole course that I'm really happy with, that's really working. And I said, okay, well, now at the end of the semester, now there's a little 4-page thing and you do this. And it was not like fully integrated into the course. Right, I mean, I improve that over time. But communicating this to people in an email, if you really want, I guess I'm saying this, it doesn't mean these aren't quality courses.
No,
but that quality may not be showing in the precise way that you're looking for, because the faculty don't know how. In this case, it's different, I assume. If you're in the math department and they're asking for a math qualification, I would think that would be pretty easy. But what you're doing is you're asking English faculty to do an ethics project. That's not the same thing.
No, all of us struggle with that. I'm supposed to be teaching writing in my math class. So, let me tell you, I feel unprepared. I write very, very well, but writing well and teaching someone else to write well are two different animals.
Yeah, I can add to that, just trying to come up with writing prompts
prompts.
and to direct students what to write and how to write. We were not trained. It took a major group effort together to try to figure out, all of us putting our minds together, looking at what we were directing students to do, and then getting together and going, how can we make this better? How can we define this better and add some prompts that are missing? And that helped change all our our assignments into more of a writing assignment versus just math and pictures. Maybe the same aspect could be done with the English courses. When you're talking about stories, maybe have the faculty bring in how they feel about this. I would have made that decision. I think I would have done this because of my cultural history. What consequences would that have been? And maybe bring in a little bit of the ethics into articles that are being written by faculty projection of what we feel, and that would then train the students to consider those feelings. Maybe it wouldn't take a different prompt. It would just take bringing that into some lectures, some discussions of feelings.
Juliana, I think that you have a good idea there, that bringing in professional development might be helpful. That's exactly what we did for the writing. We have a writing course running right now. It's for all of the faculty, for the non-writing faculty, non-English faculty. And it's designed with the help of the English faculty to teach some basic concepts about how do you teach writing. So things about how do you provide feedback? How do you put together an effective prompt? That's covered in that class. And Esther, I don't know how many people I think we've got about 40 faculty that are working on that right now. We could do something very similar with personal responsibility this coming year, working in partnership with one of the philosophy faculties. I think it'd be an interesting project.
I think it's a good idea. I
think
do, as long as the person who's coming in like has the expertise to like help us, like somebody who actually does ethics work, who can say this is how we set up assignments, and this, like, the students don't even know about different ethical systems. Are we supposed to be? I don't even get it. Are we supposed to be covering ethics in the class? Like, we're supposed to be teaching them about like the different ethical system. Like, I don't even.
Now read the outcome though. It says at the end, students will be able to connect choices, actions, and consequences. All they have to do is be able to connect a choice or an action with the consequences in an ethical context.
Right. Well, so let's say my course is about AIDS. So it's pretty darn easy. The students, we talk about personal sexual responsibility or something like that, or if they choose to, they can talk about that. But I mean,
I think that's a perfect example. You don't, all they need to do to be able to hit this is to be able to say, here are my choices, here's some potential actions, and here's the consequences that could result.
Yeah, but that doesn't, not really, because they have trouble when you ask them to talk about core values, because for one thing, they don't understand what that means. And to be honest, I don't really understand what that means either. I think that's an idea that comes from some school that like I don't necessarily totally ascribe to. Okay, whatever. We all have these core values, and they have to look inside and find their core values. And then they're supposed to contrast those with other people's values. And like, that's not the same thing as, let's say, we've studied AIDS and we've talked about the consequences of like unprotected sex and so on.
Well, I think one of the, just understanding different ethical perspectives means that you may look at, it's that different people may look at the same ethical question and come to different conclusions based on their upbringing or their cultural background or their life experience. It doesn't mean that they have to be able to say, that's an example of so-and-so ethical thought. There's an example of this. It's just a recognition that different people think about these things differently.
It appears that we're converging on the same kind of idea. Juliana, I think this is a great request for professional development. And I really appreciated Susan's comment on how the faculty work together. And Jenna is always happy to partner with faculty to provide additional professional development. The thing is, we don't want to mandate another meeting on top of your schedules. So if you would like some professional development, we will be happy to coordinate that resource for you and create the collection. We just need to know what is it that you need, when your faculty is available, when your faculty are available to do it, and then we will be there.
Based on the descriptions in the rubric, I would think that it's talking about actual ethical lenses. So like looking at utilitarianism and personal rights theory and things like that, because when it says demonstrates an awareness of ethical theories, standards, and practices, that to me says like formal theories such as universalism, relativism, things like that. And it sounds as though many students may not have actually encountered those terms or those theories and philosophies.
This actually says or. This is an or here. We've summarized it here. And so it may be through a lens, a cultural lens, or it may be through an actual theory. It just depends on what the faculty's choice is. I'm sorry, we were trying to get those summarized in a concise way, and we may have lost some of the meaning there.
When the evaluators are looking at these artifacts, are they aware of that the student doesn't necessarily have to communicate various ethical perspectives, like established ethical perspectives, in like in the sense of an ethics type of course?
Yes, they are.
Oh, okay.
I was in that norming session and we were very aware.
Okay. Yeah, because to me, it sounds like a pretty formal ethics class definition, but I guess it's sort of being applied differently.
Back to the idea of some kind of professional development, the way we have set up the writing course is that it is there are a series, I believe, 3 videos plus 3 additional support videos. And then there's an assignment that the faculty member does at the end. It's completely self-paced, it's completely contained. They can start it anytime they want, and they can work through it at any pace that they want. And then Esther and I are there just to answer questions or to connect them with one of the English faculty if they have a more specific question about writing, outside of the context of the resources that are there in the course. And would that format work well for this course on personal responsibilities? Would you find that helpful?
Yes, sorry, you're saying that like a sort of an online, like self-paced module that somebody, yeah, I would. Okay. I would look at it. I mean, I don't know that I'm speaking for all the English department at all. I'm just saying, like, my personal experience is that I look at this and I go, I really don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. And this isn't a class where we talk about ethics all semester, but I don't know what the document is supposed to look like, because we talk about ethical issues, but I mean, again, and maybe it's like, maybe this is my personal bias, but usually when we do academic writing, you're not inserting ourselves, we have to hammer in the students again and again and again that it's not all like, this is how I feel about things, that we're doing research and we're doing in the humanities. It's so important to get them to like go to the evidence and find the evidence, and it's not just how I feel. And then we turn around and say, okay, now but for me, that's like part of the issue is like, it is like, what do I need? What background do the students need? Like what, like instructions and conveying to the students, like what in terms of ethical theory do the students need? And then also from my side, like in terms of like, I I don't know, also because like this is for the sophomore literature level too. I'm teaching a literature class. It's a class about novels. So what's your personal responsibility in relation to a novel? So you have to find a way to kind of relate to some of the issues in the novel, but you have to still talk about the novel. It's a literature class, right? So there has to be a way of kind of putting yourself and the text together into the paper, right? To talk about personal responsibility and issues, but to also still connect back to a text, right? Otherwise, what's the point? I mean, it's a literature course.
That's correct.
So anyway, yes. Those are some of the things that personally I would find really helpful if they were addressed in a module. As I said, first of all, information, like what kind of information do the students need to be successful at this? And then also in terms of like ideas, thoughts about like how to structure this assignment as a piece of writing, right? Because I know what an academic paper is normally supposed to look like. And this is different. It's a different style of writing, I assume that you're looking for, right? So if somebody could define to me what that style is supposed to look like, or even give me models of like, this is an ideal like model of what a personal responsibility essay looks like. Because I have never written one in my life. I've never, had read them in my life until this assignment. You understand what I'm saying? Like, I know what a summary looks like. I know what an academic research paper looks like. I don't know what this personal responsibility essay, the form, the structure of that paper is supposed to look like. So I think, both of those things would be helpful.
Those are really good suggestions, and I can already see a really interesting course coming together out of this. I know that there are some of the English faculty that have some expertise in ethics, and we definitely got at least two of our full-time philosophy faculty that focus on ethics, applied ethics. So I think that I think we could come up with something really interesting.
We also have people in the English department who do like, I'm not sure what they call it, nonfiction essay writing. Like whatever the term is, right? There's people who teach classes, I know, in like writing a personal essay. I've never taught that. Most of us have never taught that course. And I don't actually know what, is that what we're aiming for? Is this what is wanted? And if so, what are the guidelines for something like that? So I think most useful would be, yes, person from philosophy who teaches ethics to come together with maybe a person who teaches from the English department, maybe who teaches the personal essay format.
Yeah, it's nonfiction.
Yeah, the nonfiction. Is it 3305? I think the nonfiction
is the one that I'm thinking.
Yeah, I've never taught it, so I don't really know.
But I think you're also articulating the need for just something to model what you're supposed to be teaching your students. And I don't know that we have produced that for as an institution. We have provided that resource, and so I think
I've never seen one.
That might be an interesting resource to provide to faculty. And certainly having the philosophy instructor or faculty paired with the English might be a really interesting collaborative group. Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Perfect. I think we've got an answer there. Esther, you want to move on to the next one?
Yes, please.
Okay. Next one is oral communication. And oral communication is a lot more, a little bit more accessible. It's what you think it is. So it's effectively develop, express, interpret ideas through oral communication. And we have a very traditional rubric, and we look at organization. How do they organize their presentation? What type of language do they use? Is it appropriate for the audience and the topic that's being delivered? Their delivery methods, any supporting materials that they've used, and a central message. Is there a central theme that you can pick out throughout the entire presentation? And here are our scores. When we did this the first time, you can see that our scores were in the low or the mid to high 30s, with the exception of the central message. The students did a little bit better there. When we did it again in 2021, when we did the evaluation, you can see that all of those scores improved. I know that they're still red, but they definitely went up. And I think, do we have anyone from OralCom here? Okay. I know that there was some work done on aligning assignments. I know that there was, one of the things that they did was, these are all recorded recorded presentations. And so there was a lot of talk about how do you teach students to actually do a presentation that they're recording versus a live presentation. And so there was quite a bit of work there, and I think that helped improve the scores. What are your thoughts here? Travis, you're asking me, how was the overall score calculated? Okay. Can you elaborate just a touch for me?
Yeah, I didn't know if it was like an average because all those numbers are above 40%.
Okay, so what we do is two faculty, I take each dimension, okay? And so let's say that on organization, one faculty member gives the student a 2, and the next faculty, the other reader or evaluator gives it a 3. That goes down as a 2.5. And so since that student scored a 2.5, they go in the bucket of having met the criterion. Now, another student, the faculty member, one gives them a 1 and one gives them a 0. They get a 0.05 or 0.5 for their score. That student goes in the bucket of having not met the success criteria for that dimension. Okay.
So does overall mean they either met all criteria across the board, or
no, that's
what
just
is the
the average of all the scores on all the dimensions
it's just the average of all the scores?
for a person. Yeah.
Okay. I guess I'm real confused that I'm having trouble with the math of how you get such a lower average when all the other scores are well above.
Okay, because what may be happening is that these 50%, they may have been getting 3s and 4s. And then there was a whole group, there was the other 50% that were getting 0s and 1s. And so there's enough of a gap there that the overall is below 40%. I'll go back and check the numbers, but I believe that might be what is happening. I know what you're saying here was how can you have 50, 50, 50, 50, 60, and then overall 40% are not, only 40% of those are making it. Part of the problem may also be that you may have someone who gets a 4 on the organization, but they have 1s and 2s on the other dimensions of the rubric. And so that brings their overall score down, average score down.
Okay.
One thing that I noticed when evaluating these artifacts is that there was a pretty wide latitude in the way that students were permitted to record their videos.
I was talking.
And so I don't know whether
Yes.
I don't know whether it actually matters so much, but I noticed that some were able to use notes, some were not able to use notes. And then there were several other differences, but one of the primary differences among the videos was that some were recorded all in one continuous take, whereas others were sort of spliced together. And so the ones that were spliced together were more professional overall because they were able to do multiple takes and edit their videos. And so there was one in particular that was very polished, but it was like a YouTube video where they would like say one sentence or maybe just one phrase, and then it would be a quick smash cut to another thing where they would say something else. And so it was very well done, but the fact that it was so polished was more a result of editing techniques rather than the students' actual communication skills.
There are the instructions that we see from the faculty member, and then there is the instructions that are given to the student. And I'm not always aware of how much editing the faculty member allows. But that is really an interesting observation. I don't look at all the videos. I just don't have time. But that's an interesting observation. It'd be fun to have it'd be interesting to have a conversation with the comm faculty on maybe what is their consistency.
Yeah, it was kind of fascinating to see all the different approaches that students took.
Any other thoughts on this about how we, careers is almost more in the area of assessment because, you know, if you've got two different approaches to creating the assignment, one you're allowed to practice, one you know, you just get up and speak and you don't edit or anything. It means that you get very different results. So it's almost a consistency in terms of the structure of the assignment. Are there any other thoughts? Yeah, I know this is a little bit difficult because this comes out of one single discipline.
I have a question. I'm looking for the raised hand. There we go.
Okay.
Leah, so in order to get students to make the effort on an assignment like this, it has to be worth a lot of points, right? So I'm going to give students an assignment to make a TikTok video. You know, and so they're not going to speak probably on that video. It's all about the message, and I want to give them something creative to do, so they can apply, you know, hopefully what they've learned about conservation biology to a communication. But so let's say next year I do this assignment. What's the percentage of the total points in a course that you recommend, and how much upfront teaching do you expect instructors to do regarding, you know, presentation, language, delivery, etc.? You know, because I look at these things as, okay, I'm trying to help the university figure out where these kids are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not looking at it as, okay, in biology, I'm supposed to teach X, Y, and Z because I just can't, you know, I mean, I have to just focus on what I can actually do through Zoom. What advice can you give me if I, you know, get together an assignment for my introductory biology class for non-science majors, you know, for next year?
It sounds like fun, actually. Let me take it from the direction of writing, because again, my background is mathematics, but now I need to really teach some writing. I will have to tell you that I depend heavily on the English department to teach the fundamentals.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I'm not teaching grammar, I'm not teaching topic sentences, none of that. But what I do teach is how do mathematicians write? How might that be different than other disciplines? And then we spend a lot of time practicing how to express mathematical concepts or ideas or instructions in writing. So rather than the answer being 5, we talk about, okay, now I want you to explain how you got 5 and I want you to use your words.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really kind of thinking about it in the context of the discipline. As far as oral communication, again, I would be depending on if I was doing an oral assignment, I would be depending on the English, on the communication studies faculty to really set the groundwork for me. And then I would really be focused more on how I would apply that within my discipline and within the context of the content that I'm using.
I can also
I hope
add,
that helps. Esther, what do you got?
so NS is responsible for teamwork, and one of the ways that Houston Brown used to incorporate both oral comm and and teamwork in the introductory chemistry course that he taught was to have the students submit a group presentation in groups of 3 or 4. And so that way you could tackle the assignment that is mandatory for NS, which is the teamwork, and students work together to develop a common project. And that common project, the culmination of it could be a presentation that they record or that they present in front of the class towards the end of the semester. So this, especially if it's a long-term project, this may be a workable way around it.
You also
Okay.
asked about number of points. For signature assignments, I believe we require that it should be at least 5% of the grade, of the overall grade. Esther, am I remembering that correctly?
Well, we recommend 10, but I'll accept anything in the neighborhood.
10%. Okay.
But if you've got 2, 5 and 5 is 10, right?
Yes.
Everybody has 2 areas that they focus on.
Okay, so this brings up another issue, and I 2 semesters since I've been back at UHD teaching since 2019, because I took a brief hiatus. I forgot to export all of the artifacts before I graded them, and so I only got 1 of the signature assignments submitted because. So what do we do in that case? Is there anything we can do, or is that just you screwed up? You lost the data.
You can download just the original papers without any of the grading if you're using Turnitin or something.
Oh, they're not Turnitin. The artifacts are not in Turnitin. But you're saying that's the way I should do it. If they submit to Turnitin, then I can't go wrong.
Suzette, my recollection with Blackboard, even if you're not using Turnitin, you can, there are 2 options there, and I'll have to look them up for you. And you can click one option and it downloads the assignment with all of your red marks in it or all of your edits in it. And then you can click another option and it just downloads the original papers.
Okay, if then I will contact IT and see if I can do that, because I graded one of the assignments this semester, and it's in a class with 40 students. So it was a lot of data. So I'll see if I can get that.
The more common error that I see when people are downloading, and this is another weird thing about Blackboard, if you just click, let's say you've got 50 students in the class, Blackboard shows you 25 on each page. If you don't do show all and then click that download, you only get the first 25. And so very often I only get maybe a third or a half of the class that way. But we haven't had a lot of problems with getting papers that already have been graded. And there's all of those faculty edits in them. All right. Esther, would you like to move on?
Yes, please.
Okay. Visual comm. So visual communication is submitted by the art classes and mathematics. And it's effectively develop, express, and interpret ideas through visual communication. We look at organization, image type that was selected, any supporting materials that are used, and then central message. And so here are the results. And by the way, this is the first time we have assessed this one. The first time we have tried to assess this, we only had artifacts, and there just was not, there was not enough there. And so we elected not to do any type of assessment back in 2018. This year we had quite a few, and so we were able to do some work there. And you can see that even though again, we're not at that 70%, our students did pretty well. Susan, what are your thoughts on this? And Jean, what are your thoughts on this being part of the math faculty? Susan, you know what I did? I know you didn't understand that we had to upload it twice, but I worked on the signature assignments. So I just went over the empirical and quantitative reasoning and pulled the same assignments for both.
Well, this is Jean. I think when I look at these numbers, it's actually kind of higher than where our grades overall stand in the math department when you look across like freshman or sophomore level courses. So I'm kind of pleasantly surprised by these numbers in the sense, if they're accurate, it's slightly better than what with the actual numbers in the courses look like. So the overall number, as my colleague was asking here, yes, it does seem like when you're looking at the number across, it shouldn't be just like a straight average, because each of the numbers there represents percentage of students doing 2.5 or higher. That is how you got those numbers, right, like Leah?
Yeah, I think I understand what you're asking me. Yes.
Yes, okay. Yes, just like you explained, the reason why the overall is so low is because you may be having students barely making that 2.5. You may be having a bunch of students making the 2.5 or slightly higher, but also having very low scores in other categories here. When you look at individual averages, yes, it will be lower because individually those number will, the number of students making it above 2.5 will be smaller overall. Yeah.
I will say that when I kind of look at the math area, this supporting materials provides an explanation, supporting materials, explanation, examples, illustrations, etc. Make an appropriate reference to the information or analysis that particularly supports or establishes the topic. In other words, we would get a graph from students, but there wouldn't be any explanation on that graph. So there may be numbers down the side, but we don't know if those are percents, are those integers. We don't know. And so there wasn't a lot of labeling. And then there wasn't any narrative around them about what does that graph mean? How do I interpret that graph? So part of it was the construction of the graph. Part of it was interpreting that graph for the viewer.
Yes. So yes, so I remember when we were doing the norming of this, that was one of the issue we're having. And I mentioned that day that unfortunately, this is how student and even the average person tends to think about math, just numbers, dry numbers, picture, and no, no meat on the bone. By the way, Susan, if I remember well, Susan was actually the one or one of the men person that wrote the signature assignment that we're using now. So good job, Susan. I hope she's still here. Okay.
You know, one of the things, John, one of the things that I also notice about math is that we are all using the homework systems either provided by Cengage or
yes.
yeah,
Cengage or Pearson.
And students don't write at all in those assignments. You type in the answer or you click the multiple choice. There's no writing at all. And so the only way a student would have any experience writing in the context of the visual communication or in any other context is if we as faculty are actually making assignments outside of the regular homework platform.
That is a very good point. Excellent point. Yes. we encourage students like to keep a notebook when they're solving those problems in in Cengage or in person, but they do it the quickest way they can do it. And that's where part of the problem really lies, because they don't keep record, they don't show their work for their own understanding. They just sometimes keep trying stuff till it says green and they move on. And yes, we really need to add other assignments where we emphasize the need to show work. Otherwise, if we just focus completely on those platforms, then this can only get worse from here.
Suzette, let me ask one more question, and then I want to get back to you because I know you've got your hand up. Would it be helpful to the faculty, Susan and John, if we had a small working group put together maybe 3 or 4 sample assignments? Or, you know, faculty could use them if they wanted to, or they couldn't, but it would help students. It would be focused on kind of developing those explanation skills or those writing skills that would help them provide some support to the images that they're drawing.
Yes, I think that would be useful. I think that would be useful. The only issue here why most faculty keep most of the assignment only on Cengage or person is the grading load. So, but yes, if you were to create some clean assignments, maybe 5 or around that number for the class, some colleague might be willing to work with those, because throughout the semester, that would mean really just maybe grading that once a month or something, or once every few weeks. That might not be too bad. So I think that might actually be a good idea, because right now, most people just do the Cengage or the person, and the only time they do really grading is like either with major exams or maybe quizzes, but yeah, that's it.
Okay. Susan, you're muted, hon.
Yes, so.
Okay, my comment there on the
sorry.
math. We could build custom questions in my lab and put a box, an essay box that says, you know, please, discuss your answer. And we could turn that into an automatic grading where math faculty would actually grade it. The student would just be given like 10% of the overall grade for writing something in that box to get them used to doing the comments. That would bring in that writing a lot more frequency to assignment problems without impacting faculty of now you've got to go into my math lab and grade 40 students, 3 questions, 4 questions that are essays apiece. We've got hours now and we are not English people. Trying to grade this stuff is again difficult for math, but you can turn on an automatic grade feature in my lab for essays and just give the student credit for putting something to get them in the habit of talking about it. That might help a little bit.
Okay. Suzette?
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, Susan. Used to people referring to me as Susan, so it's confusing me. Yeah, so Leah, I wondered about this visual communication because in the sciences, of course, we assign students to do really basic experiments and to write up their experiments. And there's always a graph that they need to produce. And hopefully they discuss that graph in their paper, and usually they don't. But another way at dealing with this, because that assignment always ends up this write about your experiment always ends up being really challenging for some students. But another way of getting at this, can they actually interpret visual communication, would be to give them something and say, analyze this. What does it mean? Can you interpret? Can you discuss? Can you explain what this graph means? And that's useful to those of us in the sciences, because we can then use that as an assessment to see if our instruction is getting through. But is that useful to you for this kind of an assignment?
Just by, and this is probably more information than you want, each of the disciplines in the core are assigned 4 outcomes. So natural sciences is responsible for critical thinking, communication, empirical and quantitative reasoning, and teamwork. And so as part of that communication piece, if you wanted to do those kinds of activities, I think it would help support students and get them into the habit of thinking about interpretation of visual images outside of the math department. And again, these skills are built over multiple courses. And so that's why they write in 1301 and 2, they write in sophomore lit, they write in history, because it's giving them multiple opportunities to practice those skills. So short answer is absolutely. I think that if they can, I think it might actually be more valuable because they are doing this in the context of almost of an application. I've performed this experiment, I've gathered this data, I have an intimate understanding of it. Now I have to explain it to somebody else.
Esther, does that make it more challenging for you? Because you've got to manage all of our signature assignments, right? Or does it matter?
It really doesn't matter because NS will only provide signature assignments for teamwork and empirical and quantitative reasoning for assessment. So
Okay.
the other things that we do, and we can do as much or as little as we want, they don't impact the assessment process. They just help students be better rounded when they get to those courses where they're going to be asked to do this.
Mm-hmm. And I primarily teach non-science majors. So
they will likely be assessed on these somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But it would be nice to have them come in with more experience, having worked on these kinds of assignments.
A comment that I could make about trying to get math people to do more visual communications, and something I have found since we all have been forced to go into Blackboard a few years back, right, when COVID hit, we all had to post stuff in Blackboard. And I found that now all my classes are required to do some sort of discussion posted, to be active in Blackboard and to toss things back and forth at each other. And I found that discussion in the discussion forums tends to be more of a discussion than a graph. If we could build some assignments where we give them a graph and then we ask the students to discuss the graph openly in a forum and respond to another student to critique them or whatever, and only base the discussion on a graph, we may train them to look at, what's wrong with this graph? Well, I can't tell what the y-axis is for. You didn't put it on there, miss. Can you interpret the future trend of this graph? And feed them those little things all the way through the semester on a discussion board, which is only one post for faculty, that might help the students when they do a graph to go, I need to talk about my y-axis. I need to discuss the future trends. I need to do those things that I see in Blackboard. I never thought of that. But when I have had my like 1310 students, I asked them, how would you prefer to be modeled? Would you prefer to be modeled with an exponential salary or a logarithmic salary? And then they have to go in there and discuss how their pay should be structured from the time they're hired to the time they retire. And they really bring out the point. Somebody will go, well, I want a log because my pay goes up forever. And somebody else goes on there because they have to argue with one person and agree with another. And they'll get the argument for the log is, well, if I was paying you that kind of salary, I would go broke well before you retired. And so they see how this trend, how they can discuss the future. And it's really helped them discuss the signature assignment as a result. So I think that would work possibly to increase these scores.
Okay, that's a great assignment.
That is amazing. I actually use a table I used to use a table in my first general chemistry lecture, and I would put up the anonymized grades from everyone, and I would ask students to derive what are the best practices based on the grade distributions that the previous semester students got. And they were looking at stuff and they were like, who got the A? And let's see how the scores were distributed. And they would say, oh yeah, they have to do homework. Oh, I should do homework. So it was a properly labeled table, and they were deriving their own conclusions based on findings.
All right. Well, I think this is definitely an area that we can work on a little bit more. I personally, as someone who teaches some of these courses, I would love to see some more assignments like that and see how other faculty are approaching it so that I could kind of adopt some of them and use them in my class. So yeah, very cool. Okay. Are we ready to look at the last one, Esther?
Yes. Social
responsibility. And social responsibility is composed of three components: demonstrates intercultural competence, articulate knowledge of civic responsibility, and engage effectively in regional, national, and global communities. And this one, we've had a bit of a struggle with it. Social sciences and political science are responsible for responding to this one. And one of the things that we run into is that these are such distinct areas. These are not different parts of a rubric. These are distinct areas that we're supposed to cover. And so it's hard to determine, okay, who should be responsible for the civic responsibility piece? Who should be responsible for engaging effectively in regional, national, and global communities? Or who should be responsible for intercultural competence? I can tell you that just speaking for the political science faculty, since I don't think we've got anyone here from that discipline, that they're very comfortable with the civic responsibility. The intercultural competence, they're not. That's not part of their discipline. And so one of the things that I think that we need to do from an assessment standpoint is decide which of these components, which disciplines are responsible for each of these components. Here is, we only had one read. And part of the problem was that the faculty, and the faculty told me this, I was the facilitator for this one, they just really struggled. They couldn't figure out which rubric they should apply it to. They couldn't figure out whether or not the assignment was aligned. They just really struggled, and it really took them a long time to evaluate. So we did do quite a few artifacts, but we didn't have time for a second read. And you can see that the scores are very, very, very low here. We've lost some data here, so I don't have a summative score for intercultural competence, but you can see that we just really did not do well. We did not have any assignments that aligned with civic responsibility the first time that we did this. So we only have one set of scores here, and then we should have two here. This is for global communities. And so again, you can see that the scores are very low. What are your thoughts? And I've
Travis,
got
first.
two hands raised, and I don't know who they are.
So just speaking for psych, we thought we were just doing intercultural competencies. So like our rubrics, our assignments are not designed for the other two. We thought we were given that one part of the rubric. So if that's not how it's being assessed, you should know that, because we think we're only doing that one section.
And Travis, you're right. All of your assignments fit into that intercultural competence. It had nothing to do with global communities or civic responsibility. Suzette?
Which course handled global communities?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think one of the political science assignments, the closest we really got to global communities was the assignment was something like, you're in a village that's not in the United States. And then it went on to talk about kind of an ethical dilemma. Soldiers in that village have a group of people lined up, and they're going to kill one person until someone confesses to shooting at the soldiers. And you know who that person is. What is your responsibility? And it's really more of an ethical thing. The fact that it occurs in a village other than the United States is almost irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it got that the faculty, as they were reading that, when they saw, well, it's occurring in a village outside the United States, that must be the global piece. And then they were trying to apply this rubric to an assignment that really was more about ethics. It would really have been much closer. It was much closer to personal responsibility than global communities.
This one seems like it's just perfect for classes in ecology, environmental biology, sustainability. I mean, that's really in our wheelhouse because, what decisions we make in the United States regarding resource use affects just about every country in the world. So that's just one thing to throw out there, not that we need more work in our department. And the other is geography. Geography seems like they could handle this one.
I don't think we've got a geography course in our core right now. But I can, yes, I agree that I can see how geography would be well aligned with this. Lindsay?
Hello. So I'm from criminal justice. And so I just want to echo a lot that we've heard. Makes me feel a little bit better that I'm not the only one that was a little confused about which kind of a approach to take, whether it's a civic responsibility rubric, because I was trying to fit all of them into it, and that's
it's a big ask.
A lot. Yeah. And I will say too, with the assessment scores, I think definitely an area, and that's speaking from me, of some communication or some areas to maybe communicate with the faculty as to specifically which one we're doing, because I quite frankly, I don't know. And then hopefully be able to improve those scores, because this is the first one that's been in all red. So definitely some room for improvement, but definitely, at least for me, really appreciate some more information so I can work to improve these scores.
I think that's kind of where the General Education Committee is heading as well, that we can't just say this one group of courses, social sciences, for example, should be responsible for all three of these. In some cases, there's just not a clear alignment. And I think we need to think more carefully So rather than saying that everybody has to do everything, we need to be saying, okay, maybe intercultural is better for psych. Maybe civic responsibility is better for political science. Maybe global communities is better for an ecology course, for example. Timus, I'm sorry. I just saw your hand, excuse me.
No worries. I was in line. So I think it's very concerning that the political science faculty are not in alignment with the outcomes or whatever they've been assigned. Leah, how do we correct that? Can we like give them a list and say, well, I don't think it's the Gen Ed committee's role to dictate or assign. I mean, shouldn't that come from within the disciplines? Is that permissible? So we can say, hey, you know, we hear you and we see these scores and we see the misalignment, and can we give them a deadline and say, here's a menu, pick your category? Can we do that?
Absolutely. And that was really my thought. I think maybe I misspoke, was it's the faculty that need, as a group, the faculty within each discipline need to look at this and say, all right, this piece, my course, the content of my course lines best with, and then they've got their three choices. Is it intercultural competence? Is it global communities? Is it civic responsibility? Or is it something else? I know, Travis, I just saw you twitch. But I do think that we need to have a more discrete conversation about how these outcomes are distributed through the general education core. And so maybe for social responsibility, our real focus is more on assessment and cleaning that up and making that alignment better, figuring out what works best. And because when I look at these scores, it has nothing to do with what our students can and cannot do. It really seems to be much more about the assignments.
Well, so would it be possible? I mean, I guess like isn't this the role of like the program coordinators? I mean, this wouldn't be just individual faculty, and it wouldn't be a Gen Ed committee with only, I think, isn't Jason a political scientist, but it wouldn't just be one person. Wouldn't this come from below rather than from like or no?
What I was thinking about maybe as an option is maybe a small working group within the discipline. And their charge is to look at these, discuss them, discuss it with their colleagues, have whatever meetings they need to have within their discipline. And then as a collective, come back and make that recommendation.
Right, but in terms of the chain of communication, I mean, wouldn't we communicate that to the program coordinators of here? I mean, we could do that with everyone. We want to make sure there's alignment and assessment. And so one of your tasks, maybe for fall, what would it be, 2022, is to review, your learning outcome, your assessment outcomes. And if you want to change, then you, within each program, will decide. So that, I mean, coming back to Travis's discipline, psych decides, political science decides, is that?
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I'm heading toward. I certainly think that you need to involve the program coordinator in that. But if that program coordinator does not teach those 1 in 2,000 level courses, he might not be the right person to be making the decision. It really needs to be those faculty that are actually in the classroom. In those
right. Well, no, and I'm not saying that the program coordinator would decide, but the program coordinators, it seems to me, responsibility would be to put together a subcommittee or to just assign meeting times and say, here, we're gonna make these decisions. I don't think it would be Gen Ed doing that.
because this, we have been paying these working groups to work on this. And there is a work product that is expected if I'm going to, if we're going to pull it out of the budget that I use. And so we have often worked collaboratively with the program coordinator. Just as an example, before we started the math working group, I worked with Tim Riddle, and we talked about what we need to have there. And then Esther and I put together kind of a little template that they would report back on. But it was kind of a collaborative thing. But Esther, what are your thoughts? I know you've worked on one of these working groups too.
I think the working group idea, it's great, but it may come across as a top-down approach, and that's definitely something that we would like to avoid as much as possible. And so if we could find an alternative, and these conversations are really great for that, and I think in the first part of our session, it really came across as how do we engage new faculty, recently added faculty to the core curriculum, in providing them the resources that they need to succeed, that would be very helpful. And in some instances, it may be that they're ready and they're there, like they have the assignment template developed. And I see, Travis, your hand is up, and the point is some departments are doing a better job than others, or are more attuned to the assessment responsibilities as others. And those are not the departments that we have an issue with. It's typically the harder to engage departments where we see more struggle. And there it's really hard to get faculty from those areas to work with us collaboratively. And I guess we are hoping that you could give us some ideas on how we can open that door and create this interaction and this productive communication between them and Gen Ed. Travis?
I just wanted to speak in favor of the work groups. I participated in one this last year. And one of the things I think that is really great about them is that the big bad specter of assessment can come into play in a good way. Like a decision has been made and something has to change. And then it's thrown to faculty, me and another psych person worked together. And then we went to all of the full-time instructors that were working on or with this course. And for us, we made a decision in psych a couple years ago to focus on our intro course, and it's primarily taught by full-time faculty now. We see that as an important thing. And so we got together and we developed the assignment. And, I know top down sometimes it's not great, but sometimes it is like something has to happen and you're given the choice as to what's going to happen. So I think there's some power there. And we've got a new assignment that we're using. So I think it worked.
What about other departments? Like in English, we already have committees. So if you want something to change in English 1301, 1302, we got a committee for you already there. Same thing with sophomore lit, those 2,300 in the core. So that's governed by the curriculum. So what about the other departments, and especially the departments with which, that there have been problems? Do they have standing committees that could do exactly what Travis just talked about, which is to say, okay, we're going to move things along? I'm not sure the departments that are represented right now.
I don't think we have anybody from, for example, sociology. We've got Travis from psychology. We do have 2 faculty from criminal justice, I believe. I don't think we've got anybody from critical race studies or social work. But I will say this, every discipline and every department seems to structure their faculty oversight slightly different. And so, I am all for saying what is your structure and can we use that structure to get feedback on this or to make this decision? But if that structure does not exist, what do we do?
Yeah. Yeah, and I certainly don't have an answer to that. I see what Travis has written in the chat, but I think, you know, one of the problems with gen ed is that like people don't love it, right?
Do we ever love a group decision?
You know, and well, but I mean, but gen ed should be the, you know, I mean, ideally would be this positive, exciting entry point into, you know, into the university where students are preparing to go into their majors and, you know, broad learning. And so, you know, I think these mean policies, but, you know, I don't have an answer to your question, Leah. It doesn't seem to be a good use of the Gen Ed committee's time to have to try to figure out how to do what program coordinators should be doing, which is making sure that their faculty are following policies and are doing the work of the university.
I don't think that's what we're asking, though. We're saying, what we're saying here is a list of choices that have been assigned by the state to disciplines in these bands. We understand that you may not be comfortable with them. Here are your choices. Whatever structure you want to use, help us figure out what, or show us or tell us what is best for the courses. Versus me saying, you need to be this, or saying what you're doing is wrong. That's not what I'm trying to get to. What I'm trying to get to is how do I get that faculty feedback? And it doesn't need to be just the program coordinator that makes the decision. It needs to be a collaborative discussion among the faculty that typically teach that course.
You know, I agree, but absolutely. But the program coordinator is the one who can facilitate that at the department level. That's my only point. Much more so than like the Gen Ed committee.
And that's how we structured the last round of working groups. The Gen Ed committee only just said, here's a structure to work within, we'll pay you. Go forth and do the work. But we didn't, we sought nominations from the disciplines to be on that committee. We used what they told us. Each of them was led by faculty, a senior faculty within the discipline, and the people that worked on it were actually teaching in those courses.
So Leah, how many departments or programs need a better alignment? Like what are we talking about in terms of, we've got this huge program. How many problem spots are there?
I believe that there's probably about 7 disciplines, and I can name them here. Let me just go through them. Political science, sociology, psychology, critical race studies, criminal justice, social work. And there is one econ course. So that's, I believe, 7.
Are they all in social sciences?
No, those are the disciplines in the social sciences band, which is responsible for social responsibility. Okay,
but so is there a problem within each of those disciplines?
No, and that was what I would recommend. That's again what we did with empirical and quantitative reasoning. Empirical and quantitative reasoning is both the natural sciences and the math. We had one group from math that worked on it, and then we had a second group that worked on it from the perspective of the natural sciences.
Oh, okay. And so I guess I didn't ask my question clearly. How many disciplines across the Gen Ed program have a problem with the, alignment or compliance.
Now, that's a different question. Are you talking about social responsibility just alone or with across all of the disciplines?
I'm trying to understand how widespread the problem is. So not just social responsibility, but to what extent is the system not working, so to speak?
Tiz, I can give you a little bit more data. It's sort of outside the scope of this discussion.
Oh, okay. Okay,
So
I withdraw that then. I'm just trying to kind of understand. So I withdraw. So go ahead.
And so the disciplines that I listed, the 7 that I listed, and I'm not saying that those are problem disciplines either. I'm just saying that there's a lot of confusion for those disciplines in terms of what they should be doing as far as social responsibility.
So is there some way that we can address this from our side? We've got syllabi posted, we've got general, this is what these courses teach, that we could research and then somehow help this area do some better mapping, because I don't think it's a lack of their ability. It seems to be a confusion in that entire area of exactly what social responsibility do we do? Do I only do this one, or am I supposed to only do that one? Do I do all 3 of them? How do I address this? If there was a way we could just take what we got posted and somehow give them some help, they may be able to take and run with it. It's just, I don't think anyone's clear enough in this area to understand how to interpret this.
And I would agree. I just think that they need to have those conversations. And the benefit of the working group is, however it is composed, whether it is just, the chair nominates some people, or the program coordinator says, I want these people to work on it, or we just randomly select people that teach those courses. It provides a structure for them to both think about this, to ask questions, to get feedback from other people in the discipline, and then to communicate a formal response.
So could we give them, from this standpoint, some sort of direction? Like, when we talk about giving students writing prompts, discuss this, do that, critique this. A lot of times we have to help the student understand exactly what those definitions or the verbs that we're using, what we expect, or anticipate they're going to do, what we expect them. Is there a way we can feed this as supporting information to this area? And then we can go back to like what Travis says. If they refuse to address this issue that we have brought clearly to them, and we've given them, this is what we expect you to do, some mapping from here to here and A to B and B to C based on what you're posting on the internet, then we've got a way to, like Travis says, go after them and say, you have been given a directive and you're failing to do this. I think they feel like we're not helping them. They're all confused and nobody knows how to do anything any better in the area. So we're asking them to interpret instructions that to them are Greek, where they're not seeing the connection from A to B. But if we provide that connection, can we then do like Travis was suggesting in the chat, that if we give a committee a directive, that if they don't do that directive, there are repercussions at that point?
So in each of the working groups that we did, I believe, writing, we did writing, and empirical and quantitative reasoning. I think we had 3. If I'm missing one, Esther, correct me. We had a,
Critical thinking working groups.
I'm sorry, critical thinking, excuse me, I knew it was one of those. We had one of the members of the Gen Ed committee embedded, not as a decision maker, but as a resource.
We also created an MS Teams area for all the working groups, and we incorporated not just the results of the assessment as they were related to them, but also the kinds of artifacts that were generated, so that there was no question that this is the work that was assessed. And there was a very clear way in which you can connect the scores from the assessment to the artifact that generated it. And then you could see this misalignment of the results and of the numbers that provided it. So there was a rubric, and the working groups could reevaluate the rubric and align it better with their interpretations. They could also, reframe the assignments. So there was quite a bit of latitude that was provided to the working groups in making decisions. It just, at the end, they needed to make those decisions and make those commitments to changing. Yeah, that's exactly where we're going now, Travis. I think in the area of social responsibility, we probably need we need the different disciplines to commit to one of the three, and then there probably we need to have 3 working groups. Travis?
So just to clarify, Esther and Leah, for like Psych 1303, when the evaluations were done, it was only rated on intercultural competencies, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. I mean, and two, some of the history is that nobody wanted this one. Nobody wanted this outcome. It didn't fit well with most of us. Psych doesn't want it in there, but we understand that it has to go somewhere, and we do our best to make it work.
Also, I don't remember off the top of my head, and I should have looked at this. Travis, there were a couple of other disciplines that showed up in intercultural competence, but I can't remember what they were. So this isn't just the psych folks.
No, I just wanted to make sure that like the psych artifacts weren't used for civic responsibility.
No, they were not.
Okay,
They were
good.
not.
Because they are definitely not designed for that. And
They
that's
are
all.
not. You're absolutely right.
Would one area be better than the other? I know with the ACE assignments, we had to pick, ACE 1 or ACE 2 for an area to focus on. Originally, when I made my first ACE assignment, I picked on the second area, and my scores were really low. And it wasn't until I got with a couple other people that I realized what I was trying to align to wasn't mapping well. And if I would have picked another competency and mapped to that one, it would have been a much better job. I had to refocus some things, but it became a better match. Is there a way that maybe they could address, like, we picked intercultural competency. We thought that would be a good match, but now we're seeing that we would map better to this one. Is that a possibility that they just picked the wrong competency to map to originally?
Yeah.
Thinking
So if they chose it or they were assigned it. And I think that's a fundamental question here that needs to, I'm wanting to go back to letting them pick it versus assigning it.
But that might be something that could be addressed since they have a choice. Sometimes we make the wrong choice initially and then realize we're having a problem mapping to it. Whereas if we look at some other ones, we can go with some manipulation. Maybe one of these other options is actually a better choice. It thought at first it would be more difficult and this would be the easiest, but come to find out it's not really working. Maybe that's a different way. Instead of trying to force something to map to the intercultural competence, maybe look at some of the other, psychological effects on civic responsibility. of reporting suicide, reporting people who are possibly, posting something suicidal. Is there something, another way we could address this in some other aspect that might map better?
And I think that's what we're trying to get to. And again, this is history. When critical thinking creativity was assigned, or I'm sorry, visual comm was assigned, it was assigned to the creative arts. That works wonderful for the art history. It does absolutely nothing for the music folks. But they didn't get a choice, they were just told. Now what I'm saying is we need to give people a choice. We need to align the content of that discipline and give them as much freedom as we can.
And that might get them to buy in as well and to readjust some of the big issues we have.
I agree. Guys, we are at 4 o'clock and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. This has been great conversation and I think that we can act on it. I don't think I have got anything else beyond this. Just a second here.
You
No.
have the map outcomes at the end, but
what we need to tell you is what is our next step. So I turn it back over to Esther.
thank you, Leah. Our next steps will have to include an opening towards the social responsibility band. And we are going to work with the faculty from the English department to bring about resources that will help them better engage with the personal responsibility rubric. And then most likely we're going to engage in something with math related to visual communication, either as a working group or some kind of encouraged interaction where we are going to create some assignments that they can use as discussion posts so they can better connect the visuals with the findings. There were a lot of really great comments today, and I really appreciate you taking the time to participate in this conversation. If you have more comments or suggestions or anything comes to you in the middle of the night, don't hesitate to send us an email about that. And we'll try to do our best to support and provide resources for everything that you may need to more effectively prepare our students to do better on these kinds of assignments, because ultimately it's all about their learning. We're just measuring it by this practice. So thank you so much for attending, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again at another assessment event.
Thank you, guys. Great conversation. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, this was really interesting. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.